Calling to order this meeting of Parowan City Planning and Zoning Commission. It is November 15th, and it is about 6:01 p.m. Are there any conflicts by the members with items on the agenda?
No.
Tony? No? Weston? No. Alrighty, in a moment here we're going to open up a public hearing, and as we do that, the format that we're going to follow, Dan Jessen, the city manager, will introduce us to the topic, and then we'll call for people to speak. By show of hands is preferable. A couple other pieces of business before we get started. If you haven't already done so, please, before you leave, or even now, sign in on the piece of paper just outside the door here. If you approach the microphone, when you get there, please state your name into the microphone before you start telling us your story. We're going to place a 3-minute time limit on folks that are talking. We'll let you know when your time is up. If you need more time, we'll give you another chance to speak as we recycle around and do a last call. I would also ask that out of politeness to the speakers, please hold sidebar comments to yourself, or please raise your hand, come up to the microphone, and share them with all of us. At this point, Dan, do you want to go ahead and introduce the topic, and then we'll open the meeting? Okay.
Yep. I asked Judy to put the plat up. She's getting it on there. The city was approached some time ago about potential annexation of some parcels that are just by the interchange exit 75 by Sam Haslam is the property owner. People are probably aware that it is Maverick, who is the driving force that is purchasing parcels from Sam, and wants to buy those parcels and develop them. We went through a process that's defined by the state, by state code. It has to be done. According to the county, we needed to expand that so that it included the actual interchange, although there's no parcel there for the interchange. It's just UDOT right-of-way. They're not subject to our I guess our land use code, according to UDOT's lawyer, but they have to be included so that we can properly expand the city boundaries. And so the county came back and said that that in order to do this, it would have created a peninsula. So they included parcel number C1061, owned by Rick Anderson. He was brought into this annexation at the insistence of the county and agreed to it. So this came to the city council as a petition to annex, and which just says whether it would be considered or not. The city council decided to move forward and allow it to be considered. So it went through a legal process that we checked to see if it was legal, and I will talk a little bit about with the planning commission after the public hearing about different steps and all the minutia of that, but it passed muster there. Attorney said, yep, it's good. So then it went to a portion where the county clerk has to do some noticing, and there is a protest period. You have to be there's a very specific legal definition of who is allowed to protest. That's different than just getting up in a public hearing and say I don't like it. There's legal protesters that can technically protest. If we were to be considering an annexation of a parcel of somebody who was not voluntarily wanting to be annexed, then they are allowed to protest, and there's a few other people that are allowed to actually legally protest. If there is one of those, then it goes through some other steps. Anyways, now we are to the point where there's a public hearing in front of the Planning Commission. Planning Commission, will then make a recommendation to City Council, positive or negative, and then the City Council will have a public hearing and then ultimately make the decision whether to allow it or not.
Okay. I entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I make a motion that we, enter into our public hearing concerning the proposed annexation.
And,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are now open for public comment, so we'll take questions, comments, and so on. Come on up, please.
I just have some questions, regarding this. If this
Okay,
is annexed.
excuse me, if you'll state your name, please.
Gene Mortensen.
Thank you.
I actually own the narrow strip, 10-acre strip that is immediately to the north and east at the northeast corner of this piece. I'm just curious to know if the city is going to provide utilities, as part of this annexation. And also if, I have some interest in that because, you know, for future annexations, you know, this could affect our decisions on what we do with our property.
Dan, you wanna
Yeah,
field that one?
it's up to the chair.
Please.
Public hearings can be question answer, or they can
I
just
think
be
this one
a
merits.
hearing. I'm happy to answer. So, there will be, and we'll talk about this a little bit with the planning commission, there will be, an annexation agreement. The city, so in order to legally annex, the city has to have a couple of things in place. One, they have to have an annexation policy plan, which has an area of our proposed areas that could be technically annexed. This fits within that area. The other thing that has to be there is there has to be an annexation agreement. And in that agreement, per our plan, says that the developer will provide, the development of utilities and so forth. And that will be an agreement that if the city council decides to move forward with it, it will say who's responsible for what. As we've talked about this, the utilities, first of all, sewer already goes, right down 2200 West, as you're probably already aware. What isn't, currently on that side of the freeway is water and power. There's power there, but it's not city power, it's Rocky Mountain Power. And of course, within city boundaries, the city has the first option, to serve power customers. So as we have talked with the applicant, we would, expect them to, extend the utilities that aren't there currently across the freeway. So what we're really talking about is power and water. Power and water. The city does have some conduits that were put in at the time of the sewer, and we're entertaining the idea of allowing them to use those conduits for the power, which would save a lot of cost because you have to tunnel under the freeway. They call it a bore. But we would require them to put in the water line across the freeway and the power.
And so additional annexations then, would those who would ask for that or would be granted that, would they have to compensate this developer, for that?
So the city would entertain, what's called a line extension agreement if the property developer requests it.
Okay.
And a line extension agreement, usually they're typical 10 years, and if somebody then ties on to that line, then they are entitled to recouping some of their costs.
Okay.
So that's yet to be, agreed upon, but that's typical.
Okay, I knew that's what happened when the little subdivision that's west of KB,
Yeah.
when it was, that was annexed and, the developer at that time had to compensate. You know, others had to compensate him for attachments that they made.
It's an effort to have some degree of fairness to, you know, somebody's gonna put in the utilities and then provides a windfall for somebody else. It's a way to provide some fairness there. So.
Okay. Next, other question I have, apparently then this is, where they're proposing to put the Maverick, so this would necessitate a zoning change to highway service from,
So part of the
A20.
annexation process, as the city, let's say the city, council, agrees to the annexation, they at that point will assign a zone. They are going to do that based on a recommendation from the planning commission. And the planning commission is gonna look at the general plan, and the general plan's future land use map has this designated as commercial. So it's in there right now. You can go look at it if you'd like. Some of these parcels around the interchange are designated as commercial. As you go out, they're designated as a residential. These properties right here are already designated in our general plan as commercial. So, if the planning commission does what it should administratively do, it will follow the plan and recommend a commercial zone, and then the city council would then zone it when it gets adopted as commercial. So, yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene.
Come on up, please.
My name is Doug Fox, and I have some questions. I don't care whether you answer them or Dan does. Number one is, how will this annexation help our future water issue? We're looking at about a $3.2 million water treatment plant. Will this subdivision help offset that? And also our sewage. You know, there's a possibility it could overextend what we currently have. And, I wanna know how this annexation is gonna benefit the city rather than cost us.
So, if they annex into the city, obviously then they tie into the city utilities. Per our code, they will have to bring water to the city. Water's gotta be pre-1949, so from that perspective, shouldn't impact the aquifer, cause those water rights are gonna be used either by this or by wherever they've acquired them from.
Okay.
However, they will use our infrastructure. I don't know, cause I haven't yet seen their civil engineering, the size of water connection, but I doubt it's very large. 2-inch meter. Rich is here from Maverick.
Oh.
That's who I'm referring to as I asked. So a 2-inch meter, versus, if it was an actual subdivision of residential or something, just to give you an idea of the impact on water, one versus another.
Okay.
It's not a car wash. It's been a while since I've seen the proposed thing. So, as far as, or if the city doesn't allow the annexation and they just develop this in the county, they're gonna have to drill a well. They're gonna have to have water rights to drill that well. It's gonna be in the aquifer. Just wouldn't be something that the city would have to provide. There will be an impact fee charged.
Okay.
The impact fee will offset the impact to the system as far as additional storage capacity and all of that stuff. Commercial impact fee is more expensive than a residential one. So, I don't know, it's gonna be, good or bad for the city. It's just that they'll have to pay for their impact and bring water rights.
Okay. Is this strictly commercial, or is this going to be residential mixed with it?
The entire property, all we're doing right now is annexing in raw land and
Okay.
designating it as commercial.
Okay.
We know the reason, therefore, is because there's a proposed development. And the development that's proposed isn't the entire, all of the parcels.
Okay.
The proposed development is right in the corner of that. As you come off the freeway and come around, there's that hard 90-degree angle.
Right.
There's a proposed Maverick which will take up a lot of that acreage. The acreage to the north, still owned by Sam Haslam after they finish with their purchase, will be raw commercial land, and who knows what Sam will want to do with it. He doesn't have any plans that he's shared with me at this time.
Okay.
This is basically to facilitate Maverick buying that property.
Right.
And the property below that's owned by Rick is not, there's no proposed development there either, but it will also have a commercial designation, so who
Okay.
knows.
And the main reason I'm asking this to each and every one of you is not necessarily yay or nay, but what I worry about is the current residents of Parowan. I serve, senior citizens, and I've gotta watch out for all of us. I'm one too, so, I just don't want Parowan to become another Cedar, Hurricane, St. George. Washington, and I'm gonna be watching closely, anyway. And Larry and I've had talks before, and some of you know me, but that's all. I just wanted to find out what the basis of that is. I'm not opposed to Maverick. If the RAP tax passes, that will benefit us more than anything and anybody can imagine. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Anybody else that would like to comment? Excuse me, I'm losing my voice already.
Get a long night ahead of you.
Yeah. That could be good.
I can get you some water.
Not yet.
Okay.
But thank you. All righty, last call for public comment on the annexation.
Can I give a public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. Somebody on Facebook said the city manager was just all interested in revenue. First of all, this has nothing to do with me. They made a proposal to the city. I made a comment in a meeting that Maverick brings in a lot of sales tax, and I do not back away from that for 1 second. If the annexation goes through, like, I want to clarify those statements. Doug talked about it. RAP tax is 0.01%. Sales tax is 0.6%.
0.001, isn't it?
0.001 is the decimal that gets applied. And, but as far as impact on the city, people are going to get off the freeway, they're going to stop, they're going to buy gas, they're going to buy food, and they're going to get back on the freeway. The impact on the city streets, I mean, infrastructure, yes, a little bit use of water and sewer, but this is like a voluntary toll booth for people that drive down the freeway. So, to the extent that I said something about revenue, is absolutely true. We have a high tax rate. We're trying to find ways to bring in revenue so that we don't have to have high taxes. I get that, you know, we don't want to see a lot of growth, but this will be, I was at Enoch City as the treasurer back when, just after they had made the decision not to annex where the current Maverick is by the bowling alley. They said, we don't want it. Cedar City and Enoch's annexation areas overlapped in that area. And Enoch said no, and Cedar City said, heck yes. And so that's in Enoch, but it actually is technically in Cedar City, and they collect a lot of property tax and a lot of sales tax on that Maverick. That place just, well, Maverick could probably tell us, but anyways, my point is I really don't like getting into the policy because that's not my job, but I made that comment and then it's kind of ran around out, and then, so I wanted to clarify that, yeah, actually this revenue is a good thing, you know, as we try to lower the impact on the citizens of revenue, of property tax. If we had more businesses that were paying their fair share and we're bringing in sales tax, especially from traveling citizens that don't even have to drive through Parowan. That's why I said what I said, and so I just wanted to kind of explain myself. So, anyways.
Thank you. Well, in light of that comment, any other comments? Okay, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing and go back into our regular meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. We have time. Okay, I would propose that we adjust the agenda. Matter of fact, I motion that we adjust the agenda to move the public meeting portion, item 5 on our agenda, to now. And we'll do the joint discussion with Historic Preservation regarding Appendix A following that. So just reverse 4 and 5.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. Okay, we are in our public meeting, and we are discussing whether or not to send a positive recommendation to the city council regarding the annexation of this property.
Do we know how much, space Maverick is taking out of the 87 acres?
I think you could invite the Maverick representative up and ask any questions of him. But,
Rich Pig, right?
yeah, Piggott.
Piggott. Rich, would you help us here, please?
You asked a question I'm not prepared for. Rich Piggott with, Maverick, we're at 185 South State Street in Salt Lake City, Utah. I don't have that number off the top of my head, I wish I did, but we're that middle parcel, and maybe.
We have a, pointer down there.
Okay.
Not in your eyes now.
All right, there we go. So we're this parcel, the parcel we're interested in purchasing, and we have a current LOI, is this corner piece right through here. And I believe, well, if you give me a second, I might be able to answer that question.
So you're only purchasing that one section,
That one section right there.
but the 87, okay,
And the rest of it would be this parcel that
remain
by
to,
the Haslam's. And then the majority of that acreage is the highway. And then, Rick Anderson's piece is here in this corner right here.
Your landowners are set there on that ledge in Heather.
yeah,
It shows how it's distributed. There's different landowners and they're only in this one parcel.
okay. And I think that it was asked before, as to the level of truck stop it was going to be.
Yes, yes, sir.
And so Maverick isn't really a traditional truck stop, we are just a convenience store. Even though we have a commercial canopy that is used by commercial truckers, we don't have facilities inside of Maverick for truckers. We don't have restrooms that have showers.
Mm-hmm.
We typically only allow them to stay 30 minutes on the site. There are parking stalls on this location, but there's no overnight parking allowed in a Maverick. So typically our store managers will insist the lengthiest time they'll spend is like 3 hours. The only time I think that might be extended is, as we all know who drive from my location in Salt Lake to St. George, there's sometimes a blizzard, and this might be a place for a respite for people as they wait out that storm.
Sure.
Maverick doesn't, get involved in the commercial trucking kind of industry. And I am trying to hopefully.
But you will have provisions for them to be able to fuel there.
Correct, we have a what we call a commercial canopy, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fueling positions in that location.
Didn't you say that it's very similar to which one in Cedar?
The first one you get off the exit,
So by bowling alley,
yep. that's
South.
the one.
the
Similar
north one.
would also be up in Salina, I think.
Is it the north one?
The
North
south.
one. I think the south one, I think the north one has a commercial canopy as well.
Oh, it does, that's right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
so it'd be
Yeah.
similar to that one.
Alright.
Another one might be similar would be, Nephi, the one that just opened up in Nephi. That'd be a similar one as well. And I wish I could give you an acreage, but the site plan I have here doesn't.
Oh, that's okay, I mean, that helped me visualize compared to, the rest of the area.
So the actual applicant, Sam Haslam, he owns the piece to the north of that.
Mhm.
And he said, you know, if we're gonna go through this annexation, I'd like to annex both of my parcels.
Mhm.
But he doesn't have any plans at this point to develop it. But he just says, if I'm gonna go through this, in order to have this considered, I'd like, at least like, wouldn't like one of his parcels
Yeah.
in and one out.
It just helped clarify to me, 'cause when I read it and when I've been looking at it, I thought Maverick was taking the whole,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I
And
understand.
so, yeah,
When I read the, agenda, I was like, 87 acres, is that right?
yeah.
I understand, it's a shock.
And it was higher now, because last time it was lower, but now I understand why, is because the county asked that additional parcel to be included.
Actually, no.
No?
The reason why, The original petition didn't include the northeast part of the interchange, and when the actual
Oh.
survey was completed, it included more of the UDOT right of way. That's why the acreage changed.
Okay,
Early on, when we met with the county in the informal meeting as required by law, actually the county planner said, you can't leave this corner out. So from the very start, we were considering that
Okay.
corner. Yeah, so that
There.
little piece right there was
Mhm.
what was added. And it's not even has a parcel designation, so that changed the acreage, but that's why.
So we got 10 acres of freeway
Yeah. Yep.
in there, so.
And kind of go back to one, I think it was Doug who asked the question. Typically, I actually had this conversation with a younger, coworker of mine. Maverick actually acts like 8 to 10 residential units. If the term that I don't know if it's in Parowan, equivalent residential units,
Yeah.
ERU. Our water usage is around 8 to 10 residences.
We say ERC is the language we're adopting, yeah,
Okay.
connection.
Yep, so, picture in this, I assume, we're just gonna say 10 acres. I think it might be somewhere around there for this particular parcel. So basically that would be 10 1-acre lots, if you were to consider it as a residential, which it is in the county right now.
I have a bunch of technical stuff. I don't know when you want me to go over that.
So, technical such a, what do you?
About the
If you wanna
annexation
go
policy
through that,
plan and,
go ahead.
Okay, any other questions for me?
I don't think so, we may need you again, but,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
so in case anybody wondered, I put my city manager hat back on after my public comment. I officially don't have opinions in things like this. So per our annexation policy plan, the last annexation that we did was kind of an abbreviated version. Really, we were just fixing a parcel that had got cut in half by a prior annexation that was a little messy. Criteria for the commission to consider in annexation, and I just wanna walk through that we've done our due diligence in this. It says the annexed areas must be contiguous to the corporate limits of Parowan City at the time of submission of the annexation request. That's why we had to include the freeway, 'cause otherwise you would've had a gap there. And it is contiguous. Parowan City shall avoid gaps between or overlaps with the expansion areas of other municipalities. We're not anywhere near another municipality. I'm gonna skip that stuff if it just doesn't apply at all. Proposed annexation will not be approved if they create an island or a peninsula. That's something that the county checks, and it has to go through their planning commission and so forth and get approval from their planner. That's why we had to bring in the Rick Anderson piece. It has to be within our annexation map, and it is.
Our,
Future
future land use.
Our future
land,
land use map, which has a future annexation line and a do not pass where we will never annex past line.
Right.
And this is within that area.
And just to clarify that future land use map is part of the city's, general plan. So it's adopted in the general plan, and it's state law that our annexations need to be in agreement with our general plan.
And speaking of the general plan, it also says it's supposed to conform to the general plan from a zoning perspective. That's what you guys would recommend. And in this case, I already talked about that. It does. Our general plan designates this as commercial, and that's what they're applying for.
can I clarify that it actually, I think it has it as highway services, which is commercial, but we do have two zones. We have general commercial and we have highway services.
Correct.
And I think the flume has it
And
as
the
highway
general plan
services.
doesn't exactly match our zoning. A commercial use, highway service would be conducive to a commercial use.
Yes.
I'm gonna pull up that map. Well, we talked about the next one. When feasible, the city favors annexation along boundaries of water and sewer improvements, special service districts, or other taxing entities. One of the advantages of this parcel is that it is right along our sewer, and we do have water and power across the street, across the freeway, it's not a street. Let's see, water rights are required, if you get down under development of services, and, we are in the middle of updating our water right code, and in fact, we presented it in city council in a draft format, so the new code would apply and will apply to this, and it's meter-based, and anyways, we're in the middle of finalizing that, but it shouldn't have much of a significant impact, but we will require, water rights to be deeded to the city, when they submit their plans.
And once again, priority date on that's 1949, correct?
Actually, there will be water, what's that?
Priority date will be 1949 or earlier?
December 31st of 1949 or earlier. Yep. So our new code says that when they submit their plans, depending on their meter size, then the water rights will be exacted. And I'm gonna have to double check that for the other parcels, for water rights on those, at the time of annexation. Our code, I thought this was optional, but our plan says that there has to be an annexation agreement. So, we will have that in the annexation agreement. Oh, okay. So this is this is an old one. But the red color is commercial. There is no highway service designation on our flume.
Yeah, I was just noticing that, and that's what confused me, is because on our current
Yeah.
zoning map, red is highway services, so when I looked at this, my brain just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Our general plan, I mean, it will say, for example, light residential, it doesn't say R1. And in this
Right.
case, commercial is the only possibility, and in our zoning, we have highway services and commercial, which are kind of two different versions of the same thing. So,
And
I guess you could consider, and you will need to consider, making a recommendation to, the city council of either one or the other.
Right. Yes, I agree. Just a quick question.
Yeah.
So as we talk about, this annexation, I mean, it looks to me like the next step is gonna be where that dotted line is horizontal across where it says annex name and 87 point something acres, that there's going to be some sort of potentially a lot split or something there?
So, from what I understand, there are two parcels right now, and
In that configuration?
Yeah.
they're either going to have to do a subdivision of the one parcel if they want something less than an exact parcel, or they're gonna have to adjust that boundary line.
Okay.
I would recommend they just adjust the boundary line if they don't wanna buy just the exact parcel as it stands, because otherwise you're triggering this subdivision ordinance.
Right, well, and it also impacts your water calcs.
Yep. So, that's gonna be, in the future, you know, between Maverick and Sam Haslam, and of course, this body, if there is a subdivision, or if there is a lot parcel boundary, adjustment.
Right. Thanks.
And I'll talk with you guys about that. What's that? You're buying the whole parcel, so it's moot.
Thank you.
It is not Parowan City's intent to annex territory for the sole purpose of acquiring revenue. That's funny, 'cause we've been talking about revenue. Essentially, that's a statement in our plan. The legislature had kinda took it one step forward if you read Utah code. They don't want cities to get into the habit of aggressively trying to annex properties to try to increase property taxes or have a a bidding war to try to acquire properties. So that's why the way the process works is a property owner has to approach the city and request annexation rather than the other way around. So that cities are not kind of predatorily looking for, acquiring properties and then slapping a high municipal tax on them. So anyways. There's this concept of, urban development. It has to be within the areas of potential urban service. And this is exactly what I'm describing. They don't want you to go and annex an area just because that it might be able to bring in new property tax revenue. If you have no way of serving that with your municipal services like water, power, and sewer. And so, as you read the Utah Code on it, 10.2.4, it talks about how it needs to be within a half a mile of your existing boundaries, and you need to be able to provide services. Otherwise, it's kind of this predatory nature. So, anyways. That's pretty much it. The annexation agreement, potentially could have other things in it if the city council insists. So right now, basically, it's, somewhat of a draft, and it does check those boxes that it has to. It will be done by ordinance if it is approved by the city council, and they potentially could put something else in the agreement, within reason.
Do we wanna talk at all about item 4 in that, policy plan? The financial implications?
Was that under development of services? 'Cause there's a few bullets.
It's on page 4. So it is, it's after development services.
Yeah, I'll read it real quickly. The manner in which the amenities are developed will have a bearing on how they will be financed. Property taxes with increased valuation of property and sales tax will contribute to the general fund to help defray the added expenses the city may incur by annexing these properties. In summary, the newly annexed developing areas shall finance the extension of needed municipal services, such as new utilities, streets, curb and gutters, sidewalks, and other capital improvements as development occurs. And basically, if I can sum that up, the developer needs to put in the development rather than there's a new annexation, and then now the current city residents are expected to pony up services for that. This protects the kind of existing citizens from now paying for this new property and the expansion of the utilities. So that's why it will be upon the developer to put in the extension of the utilities and so forth. With the one exception that we've, at least in the annexation agreement isn't finalized, but we've said that would allow them to utilize that conduit that was there for the power, which there's some real value to that conduit that goes under the freeway. The whole reason we put it in was for the future expansion of utilities, so it seems like that's a fair,
Seems reasonable.
Seems reasonable that we would offer that. It goes on, it is not anticipated that the annexation should or will cause any adverse consequences to the residents in the city or in the area annexed, except there may be a slight reduction in general services. Just basically talks about it dilutes, like me.
Our capacity.
Yeah, now every day now I have to come to work, I have to now worry about Maverick out there, and that like dilutes me a little bit, so it's things like that. Our public works have to go across the freeway to check on a water line. There's things like that it really does, marginally speaking, but it also then increases property tax and sales tax, which then pays for that. So that's essentially what the financial implications is getting at. It's a fairness argument.
So as I look at the environmental and land use issues in item H in the plan, we really don't run into anything unless the property is in excess of 6,000 feet elevation. And then there's some things that kick in, but those are all regulated in code already.
What would happen if we did not annex, if we recommended that there's not annex it? How is that gonna affect this whole process? Then it goes,
Still go forward to the city council. And I would suggest that this body look at it from an administrative standpoint. Does it check the boxes and so forth? There is a legislative question coming. Is this what we wanna see Parowan City look like and all of that stuff? And the city council has that, they can decline it on a whim because they don't like Maverick's logo or, you know, something like that. This body's looking at it mainly from a general plan, or have they checked the boxes and so forth and so on, you know, but. If you had a concern with its impact on our traffic or something, that would be valid, you know, for planning commission to consider.
Dan, as a side note, isn't it true that the north interchange is annexed in the city with TA?
Yeah.
So we do have, UDOT as far as, you know, the interchange annexed, so we have that.
Yep.
Impact, so, okay.
Yep, this is almost a very, very, very similar solution, other than TA is a different animal.
Right.
It's a full truck stop, but. And it's protected information, but otherwise I could tell you financial impact of that.
Any other questions from the commission? Well, at this point, I would accept,
Well, I guess is there a talk about whether or not we would prefer to recommend it be highway services or general commercial, or is there no concern on our body regarding that?
I'm more than happy to open that for discussion. Do you have a comment with regard to that?
No, I was just starting to look and see like what the differences are as to what's permitted in one and not in the other.
So, my understanding of that is in highway services, there are no residential units allowed.
I'm sorry, say that, and highway?
In highway services, residential units are not allowed. And in some commercial districts, not all, it kinda depends on when they were created and so on. But in this case, as I think it through, housing would not be allowed in the commercial district either. So, commercial districts that were created prior to 2016, some of them are allowed to have houses in conjunction with their business, say an upstairs suite or something. But that would not be the case in this newly created, newly annexed piece of property.
Well, in our code right now, residential is permitted in general commercial.
There's more to that you're not seeing.
Okay,
You were reading the, table.
okay.
There's more code to that, and far be it from me at this moment to take you to that, but
Well, yeah.
I've been through it.
Cause I was thinking, I'm in general commercial, but prior to,
Yours is an earlier lot.
gotcha.
Any other questions about zoning, a suggestion, or? I personally I lean towards the commercial side of that. It's almost sixes, but that would be my recommendation.
I don't know if, it may impact the other parcels, but in this case, it doesn't really impact the proposed use.
Right.
Highway service is literally something where, you know, it's meant to kind of be a commercial district that serves the traveling public, and a gas station is exactly that, and restaurant and things like that. By the way, it doesn't say gas station in that table anywhere.
In commercial?
No, it doesn't say it
Just
in our,
anywhere on the
in
fuel,
the
fuel,
table
gas,
of
and
uses.
oil storage
But that's
facility.
storage, that's
Yeah.
an industrial.
That's why you should be cautious if you, to restrict it too much. I mean, you know, this particular parcel, it wouldn't impact, but you need to look at, you're annexing more than just this parcel.
Mhm.
And then any future parcels in the vicinity, so,
Commercial's a little more broad, I think.
yeah.
Highway services is more narrow, is that what you're saying?
It's a little more narrow. For example, a lot of the storage facilities that are there on the other side of the freeway, under the current definition of highway service, would not be allowed. If somebody came tomorrow and wanted to get to open a storage, lot in highway service, it wouldn't be, but it would be allowed in commercial. That's just an example.
Mhm.
Say that again, it would not be allowed?
It would not be allowed in highway service.
Okay.
It would be in commercial. There is automobile service station which is there, and that's permitted in both, so that's about the closest we can come. But anyways. Convenience store, I looked and I didn't see, oh, there it is.
Mhm.
And it's there in both. I knew Rich had done his homework on. So there's a lot of things listed, to list them all, but generally speaking, it's a little more permissive in commercial. By the way, you could put a school, K through 12, in commercial, but not highway service. That's another
That kinda
example.
makes sense, you don't want kids in the street.
Right.
Well, if there is not any discussion on zoning, I would entertain a motion with regard to a recommendation to city council pertaining to the annexation and to a proposed zone.
So going off of what you said, you're recommending general commercial?
Yes.
Okay. I make a motion that we make a positive recommendation to city council to approve the annexation of 87.181 acres of real property. Do you need me to read all that, Judy? Okay. And also a positive recommendation to zone that area as general commercial. Is that sufficient?
That was very good.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Any nays? Weston, I didn't quite catch. Aye, okay, thank you. Very well, we're just about on time. Okay, so given the change that we just made in the agenda a few minutes ago, we're now gonna move into a joint session with the Historic Preservation Committee. Do we have, yes, we have some people
Two,
here.
3.
Great. And I'd invite all of the historic preservation folks, if they would, to come on up to the tables and use chairs up here. just so,
Maybe we'll, maybe I'll grab the microphone and they could pass it back and forth,
yeah, there you go.
so we can at least have it on YouTube.
I love that sound.
Yeah.
We're missing one of our members. She won't be able to attend tonight, and we're one person short from the city. So this is,
Okay,
this
are
is,
we good to proceed with what we've got?
yes, sir.
Okay, great. Well, first off, I would like to welcome the Historic Preservation Committee to this joint session. I think it's a wonderful thing to get a couple committees together, to work together. And so, I would suggest as we go through this, we'll set a few ground rules and to keep us all friendly. So let's stay on topic. We'll try not to get too deep into the weeds. Don't interrupt others when they're talking. Again, it's pretty polite to hold your sidebar discussions, share them with the group if you have a comment that's worth discussion. And please raise your hand or give a nod to the chairperson to be recognized so we don't talk over each other. And I'd like to say that in this forum like this, let's not worry about being too formal. Let's speak open and freely and get everything out on the table so that we can move along. So tonight, this is going to be more of an orientation and a familiarization. We're not going to really try and rewrite anything. I'm going to try to walk us through sort of the coding and the process and the requirements that we need to go through so that we're all on common ground. So the real purpose, the end goal, is we want to review Appendix A that is referenced in the Parowan City Ordinances in Title 15 and 42. So that's the Historic Preservation Overlay District. As we go through that, you'll realize that this effort is going to be significant, that it's not something to be taken lightly, and I would say that it's just not going to be easy. We are going to try and limit, we're not going to try, we want to limit these to about an hour apiece. We don't want to, we have business, you have business, and we all have things to do, so we're going to try and take small bites. The reason that we're actually working through this process is the city has an interest in making sure that our code is legal and enforceable. We want to stay away from arbitrary and capricious decisions. And so to do that, we want to make sure that our code is solid. A cursory review of our Appendix A would indicate that there may be some things missing, and I'm saying may because that's not yet decided. Appendix A may actually be outdated. Not sure how old that might be. If any of you know, please share that with us. And there may not be sufficient documentation with our Appendix A to actually explain the standards. So we may have requirements that citizens may come forward with questions. We may not be able to answer those. I'm not an architect or an engineer. I don't know if anybody on the Planning Commission has that background, and I certainly don't know if any of you folks on Historic Preservation Committee wear any of those hats. So that makes it a little difficult for us to answer questions off the cuff, so to speak. So how are we going to get through all this? We're going to work together. And we're going to have to come up with some ideas, because we're not sure how we're going to get to that end game yet. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about the process of, really it's land use code. So in Parowan City Code, our land use code mostly resides in Titles 14 and Title 15. Historic Preservation Code actually falls under land use code as well. So it happens to be in Title 15. So when a piece of code is written, that code comes to planning and zoning if it's land use code. Planning and zoning takes a look at it, makes a recommendation to city council as to how to treat this code, adopt it, don't adopt it, maybe make changes or not. In this case, where we're working together as joint committees, we're kind of avoiding a loop. I'd like to get out of the space where you folks go write something and bring it to us, or we write something and bring it to you, and we look at it. We think if we work together, we can shorten that loop a little bit. Once we get a piece of code that we think is fairly solid, we'll have legal review it, and then legal will come back and say, yeah, we think that's defensible and we think it'll work. Now, to modify, to actually implement a piece of land use code, the state requires a public hearing. So some of you sat through a public hearing that we had here just moments ago. And anytime we change land use code, there would be other public hearings like that. In this municipality, as required by state code, the Planning Commission conducts that first public hearing. The City Council has the option of having a second public hearing on the same topic if they so desire. Once that public hearing is conducted by Planning and Zoning, we would provide the comments to the City Council and a recommendation. And once they have that, then they can move on and have their public hearing and decide to accept as is, modify and accept or reject, and so on. So as we move into this, we get into the law of the land and we go, well, how did we get to the city code? So Utah State Code 10-9A-401 requires that every municipality have a general plan. And we have one, we're happy about that. 10-9A-527 talks about the Historic Preservation Authority. And that authority cannot be the legislative body. That authority is you folks. So you are making land use decisions in the Historic Preservation District that are normally reserved for the legislative body. So in that case, you're doing a quasi-legislative sort of a thing. So in effect, the Planning and Zoning Division promotes the orderly growth and development of the community through execution of the general plan and the Land Development Code and other supporting documents. Now, the Historic Preservation Committee does the same thing for the city in the historic district. We say, so what is the general plan? Well, the general plan is the vision for the city. So it's looking ahead. It's usually got a 10 to 20 year span. It's supposed to be updated and reviewed every couple of years for minor adjustments and so on. And so how do we use that? So typically, we take the general plan, and when something comes before, say, planning and zoning, we will take a look at the general plan, as we talked here earlier in the public hearing. We look at the future land use map, we look at zoning recommendations and so on, and try and make an informed decision that is in accordance with the general plan. Now, we don't have to. We have to look, and we're encouraged, but the general plan is not the law. The general plan is a guide. The law is actually enacted by the Parowan City Code and ordinances. So as we move into some things that'll sound more like action items as we get into it. So what does the Parowan General Plan say about historic preservation? Well, let's take a look at it, and I think we can bring that up. If we could, Judy, please. The general plan. So our general plan was adopted in 2021. Now, if we go to, I think it's section 2, let's try 2.3. Oop, we passed it. Keep going back to the higher. A little bit more, maybe it's, okay, 231. And double check in that same chapter 2 there and make sure there's nothing above that historic district. Okay, let's look at that. No, go back to the picture. So there's a couple things here that are important. There's a community vision, and you look at that and you go, well, I don't know about that. Well, that is the adopted community vision. It's not necessarily the community vision of the historic district, but it is the community vision. If we look down at 2.3, community core values, if you can scroll us down a little bit. Can everybody see that, or is this an eye test? We can maybe make that bigger on the screen. And maybe it's a moot point.
It's behind you.
Can you read it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I think we can scroll down just to the historic district part. Okay. So now this is where we start to get into the meat of things. This is what the city thinks the historic preservation is about. Now this was run by your committee when this plan was written or being drafted back in probably 2020. So there's an interesting statement there. It says, the National Register on which Parowan Historic District is listed is an honorific listing and as such does not limit in any way what a property owner may do with their property. That might be a bit misleading because it is not that National Register that would guide what an owner might do with their property. It's actually gonna be boiled down into the city code, and and our appendices is what's gonna limit what somebody may or may not do with their property. Are we good with that? Are we to the bottom of it? And I would encourage you, I'll hand these out in just a minute, but I've got some handouts that have some links and things that will help you get back to some of this material. So, let's scroll down some more, Judy. I think there's a little bit more material in here. So we talk about the livestock trail, suburban forest, and then 2.3.4 talks about some standards of design and architecture. Again, this is really big picture stuff. We're kind of saying we're generally following this plan.
I just want to point out that it says there and in our code, it designates the area of the district, and then it also says at the end, all monuments and landmarks so designated exist within Parowan city limits. So there can be additional landmarks and monuments designated that are outside of the district that also this applies to.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have that. We have
Mhm.
landmarks that are already designated.
Right.
I don't know how we'll probably get into this topic a little bit farther down the road, or we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves now, but one of the questions to ponder is, how do you add something outside of the historical district? Do we have a tool to do that?
Right, and back to your other point, you would think that it's the national
Historic register.
historic register. It's not. It's what we designate.
Right. So the point here in looking at this general plan is it's hard to really get a document together to implement something if we don't know what we want to implement. So I'm recommending that we work as a group to determine what the vision is. If this is it, let's hammer through it again and look at it and say, is this how we envision the historic district? So once we get that vision aligned or crafted, then what we'll do is we'll actually take Appendix A, and then we can go through it line by line and go, all right, what does this mean? What does this do for us? Do we gain anything, by having this in here? And maybe we take it out, maybe we don't, maybe we're gonna find some things that we need to add. Because there's another piece of this process that I haven't spoken about, but that's also our code and the implementation of it. So we have the appendix, but we also have to figure out how to implement it. And I've got some concepts that I'll get into as we move along here. So Appendix A, of course, you all know this, it's design standards, and they're to serve as a benchmark for the preservation of historic buildings and monuments within the city. It's also the basis so that we can go back and make consistent and informed decisions. You want to have the same process over and over again. Because you're going to find that every historical piece of property, every I don't want to say lot, every home, every monument, they are unique. It's unlikely that back in the day that they were cookie cutter things. They were all individual pieces of property. And it might be wise to treat them as such, so, one size doesn't necessarily, fit all. The other thing to consider, well, you all know this, I'd be preaching to the choir, once they're gone, they're gone. So if we collectively issue a demolition permit on a piece of property, it's gone. We can't recover that. So those are all things that we want to consider. So one of the things that I did in preparation for this meeting was look at other cities. Now, commonly, as we're talking amongst ourselves, we call it plagiarism when we're looking at code and so on. And that's actually encouraged in the civic sector because it's taxpayers' money no matter where you go in the state. It was all tax money that paid to get code written. Some of the bigger municipalities actually have deeper pockets. They can go out and hire consultants and so on and to do what we're doing. However, we have the opportunity to leverage those things. And the polite term for that is to review precedents. And so I did some of that. And I stumbled on what I believed was a gold standard. And that was Logan City up in northern Utah. I was actually just shocked when I came across their material. And I'm going to share some of that with you, so give me a minute to dig out some handouts here and some things. And we're going to look at some on the screen. And I'm just going to tell you that it's overwhelming. It's not my intent to make us a Logan or any other city. We are Parowan. The population of Logan is somewhere north of 50,000. The population of Parowan is slightly south of 3,000. We're not going to get there. But, as an analogy, if you get on I don't know if Logan is on I-15 or not, but let's just say that it is. If you get on I-15 and you travel to Logan, there are rules of the road all the way, from here to Logan. Even though we're only 3,000 people, we have to follow the rules of the road. Logan, being 55 or 50, about 55,000 people, they have to follow those same rules of the road. And that's the way it is with state code. The state code are like the rules of the road for land use. Now, there are some considerations made and exceptions made for smaller towns for various things, but in the case of historic preservation, that's not the case. The same standards apply north and south, big and small. So with that said, let me get these passed around. If you folks would help me, I'll start down at this end with Weston. And pass them down towards Dan, and if Dan can get them down to the table, that'd be great. Those go down to Weston. Same thing on this. Okay. I mean, it's an exercise. On the other one.
Yeah, one each, as each group, as each. So I've handed out a couple of things that I'll kind of explain. So there's a page there that has several links on it. I know that those links are a pain in the neck to type in, and I'm going to ask Judy if she would work with Heather to get that link page sent out by email to all the members of both committees.
that will link you up to the document
Other
that
Heather.
we're gonna talk about.
Took me a
I'm
second.
sorry.
Our other Heather is,
Yeah, took me a
helps
second,
with
I was
the
like, me?
historic preservation.
Her?
Sorry.
Her, okay.
And so that's the one handout. That'll get you back to some of these documents and serve as a reference. The other one is an appendix, I don't remember which one now, out of the Logan City Design Standards document. And those definitions are really might come in helpful to the group as we work through these architectural design standards. I think those are important. And what was the other one?
The historical preservation,
Oh,
Utah code.
I'll borrow that one.
Yep.
So the other one, the Historic Preservation Authority, notice that it says, in making administrative decisions on land use applications, a historic preservation authority shall apply the plain language of the land use regulations to a land use application. Plain language is important, so we can't govern, if you will, with things that we wish the language said. We can rule to the things that the language says. And number 3, if a land use regulation does not plainly restrict a land use application, the Historic Preservation Authority shall interpret and apply the land use regulation to favor the land use application. So when in doubt, if we're not clear, the benefit of the doubt goes to the applicant, which is why what we're doing here is significant. Now, a couple things. Again, we're talking, remember, about precedent. We're not trying to become Logan. It's going to sound, I've got a lot to say about Logan, but I want to give you the background so you can understand the full benefit of this. When we walk away, you folks are welcome to look at this material and say, there is no way we're going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. Or you can look at it and say, there's bits and pieces and parts of this that would be extremely helpful to us and save us a lot of time. So, in precedence for the city of Logan, so back in September of 2015, Logan hired a consultant to produce design standards. Now, that was in 2015. They actually had design standards for the historic district in 2003 that they had been using. And I'm not sure what launched them into this. I suspect maybe they got a grant or something. Wouldn't surprise me at all. So, along with hiring this consultant to run through this and produce some things, they had a steering committee that consisted of 22 members. And it was, you say, wow, that is a lot. And it was diverse. It is in the material that you can read, and I'll get into that in a minute. But there were staffers, there were planning and zoning members, there was historic people, there was a couple architects, I think, and on, but it was, to me, that was impressive. Now, all of that said, they looked at 6 precedent cities themselves. So if you think their code is unique, think again, because it's really not. They also plagiarized. So they looked at Ogden, Park City, Salt Lake City, Provo, Breckenridge, Colorado, and Madison, Indiana. And so, in about March of 2018, and I say about because there's a month in there that they don't really account for, which is 2.5 years, is how long it took that committee to march through this material. And here's what I get a kick out of, personally. The result, in their words, changes from the earlier 2003 design standards were minimal. The major changes to the document were in the formatting and the inclusion of supplemental materials and graphics. Now, we, as Parowan, might not have the bandwidth for the supplemental material and the graphics unless we get inventive and get a grant or there's lots of things we can talk about. So, now in 2023, so Logan has 5 years of experience with this material. So I called their senior planner and chatted with them for quite some time about that, and I asked him, I said, so, now that you've got 5 years experience with this code, what would you change? And he thought about that for a little bit, and he says, I wouldn't change anything. He says, it's not perfect. He says, we have citizens that come in and get fired up about, hey, you know, we don't wanna do this, and we have others that go overboard the opposite direction and wanna do things. So, the message he's sending is it'll never be perfect, and not everybody will always be happy. Now, one of the keys to their process is applications for building permits in the Logan Historic District. We require a certificate of applicability. Now, Judy, if you would bring that up on the screen, it would help. The certificate of applicability. Pardon?
Applicability.
Applicability. There we go. So the document that you're looking at here, now it's one of the links that you're provided with, but just, you know, take a look at that. Now, where the teeth are in this is it turns out that these design standards, they're not mandatory. Except you can't get a building permit if you can't get this certificate. So if you go to the Historic Preservation Committee and you want to do something, and they say, you know, that's not going to fly on that particular application, we need you to do something else. And they go, yeah, well, no. They can rattle around like that for about 45 days before they can actually walk out the door and do what they want. But in most cases, they end up negotiating to get this certificate of applicability, or appropriateness, I'm sorry. And some of the neat features of this, it tells you down there below that opening paragraph, the certificates of appropriateness shall be required for, and it gives a list, and we do some of that in our code, I think. And then it is, if you scroll down a bit, Judy, right there, they show the administrative review of that, which means administratively at the city desk, somebody can look at that, or you could have somebody on your committee look at something without the full body and do an administrative review and say, oh yeah, that particular fence fits in and you're good to go. So what it is an abbreviated process. They have what they call track 1 and track 2, might be too complicated for us, but there's these low-level things that you can do, and it's a pretty speedy approval. And then there's a longer process that is pretty strict. If you look at that second page, you can see that they have their schedule posted in that form, which I think is a little weird, but it seems it'd be hard to change. And their fees and their checklist, and scroll down a bit farther. Up just a touch. Thank you. Right there. So they tell you the checklist of items to include with the application. So it's all pretty clear. And so what does that speak to? If you have something, if you or a city, municipality has something like this, and it gets handed out and presented to all the folks in the historic district, if you will, and we know about it for monuments, it is the same process. The subjectivity goes out of that pretty fast because you look at these things and you go, wow, and it's almost like its own checklist. You can scroll down farther, please, Judy. And then contacts, which I find interesting, and keep going. And then there's the actual application for the certificate. So everything we looked at so far were just instructions and attachments that might go with an application. And now, we actually have, the application itself. And where would that come from? So that would go to the city desk, and administratively, they would take that and begin a process. They'd look at it, see if it could be processed administratively. If not, it would be forwarded to Historic Preservation Committee, and you folks would convene and run through some of this. Now, Judy, if you would just open up the design standards, and you can close this certificate. I don't think we'll go back to that. Okay, this document in its entirety, I'd have been happy to bring one for all of you. It's 81 pages. My little printer at home is still trying to recover. And so, I don't know if you look at it, you guys can talk, and maybe the city will print that document, and you can have a working copy, because I think it's important. But if you're an online worker, I think you can download it and work through it. So, in the front part of that document, Judy, if you can get us into, say, page, right there. Whoa, back up just a touch. That's page 6. Back up to page 3-ish. Keep going. Oh, that's not it.
It could be
Oh, I'm sorry.
your page 3, but
Yeah,
not,
that's a different thing. Okay,
yeah.
sorry. I'm not gonna get into that. All right, so in the beginning, in the early part of this document, they have some interesting material, and it's all to me, the background for the Historic Preservation Committee, why it's important, where it is, the overview. If you scroll down some more, please, Judy. I think that's a map of the district. Keep going. A little bit of background. They talk about the value of historic preservation, then the significance of things. Keep going. Keep going. I guess maybe I passed it. All right, so back up in that material, and we don't have to go back to it. There is a very interesting bulletized statements of events in Logan starting back in, I think, 1856 when they became a city. So they talk about they established a city, and then there are 2 or 3 full columns, just keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going. Things of historical significance for that city.
So they actually go into events in history as a way of setting a basis
One-liners.
for the historic
Yep.
areas and all that stuff.
Yep, they're just one-liners. Scroll down farther, please. Keep going. So, back up just a touch. They're starting now, and we're into this, they're talking about the design standards. We're finally getting into the meat of this document. Now, the design standards, anybody remember how many pages I said this document was?
81.
Okay, it's 80, north of 80. We'll call it that. The actual design standard portion of the document is about 50 pages.
Wow.
So, all the rest of that is appendices in the back that are very helpful, and the introductions and the background material in the front. So, Judy, if you'd scroll down some more, please. This is, back up there. This graphic is just a really general flow chart of their process. So you submit, there's a track 1 and there's a branch so you can get to track 2, which is, I mentioned earlier. And keep going. Here we go. Do you notice back up a bit? This one is residential design standards. Now in this same document, there's another nice cover page like this that talks about commercial design standards. Now this city has a process to do, as Dan mentioned, you can go out in the city and find a home that, I don't know, looks like that one in the picture that you're looking at up there, and decide that, wow, we ought to draft that into the historic preservation landmark district, I guess, what you might call that, for lack of better terms at this point. And whatever that process is, to.
You mean designate that specific home as a landmark, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Well, it does not become part of the historic preservation district per se, 'cause
Right.
it's not inside the boundary,
Right.
but it becomes a preserved building,
Structure.
structure.
Yeah.
Like a landmark would be.
Mhm.
I mean, but quite a bit more substantial. So the standards that apply to residential, in this case, would apply to this, even though it lies outside of the district. Scroll down some more, please, Judy. Keep going. Overview stuff. Okay. So if you look at 8.2 on that screen, the standards are those 5 bolded points. Now, so that we don't have to go through this whole document, I'm going to tell you that I've thumbed through it, or scrolled through it, and this is the format throughout. So they will have, I've seen as many as 9 bolded standards on a particular topic, but most of them are in the 5 or 6 range. And then the rest of the material are tips and tricks and things that just, quite honestly, I'm flabbergasted that
Yeah.
they actually had the time to do that. Some of their references, they go to this old house and that and that. But I will tell you, and you will read that in this document, if you choose to read it, that their design standards are based on the Department of Interior Historic Preservation Design Standards and the Utah State Design Standards. So going all the way back to 2003, that's what their designs were rooted in. So they didn't have to change much. And so I gave you a link. This document provides more links than you can count as to places to go and references and so on if you choose to use them. But again, to me, that is a really, really deep dive for what we want to do. But I do see that there could be some value in, as a group or individuals, and we come back together as a group, looking at the standards and maybe even pulling them out of there even, and looking at some of those and going, is this a good one? Is this a good one? Is this a good one? Throw it out, get rid of it, kind of a thing. And I don't know, I'm really just brainstorming now, but the supporting material is just invaluable. And I look at that and I go, well, we wouldn't necessarily be able to invoke all that material, but boy, we could sure point to their document a lot. Not necessarily in our code, but just as a reference that says, you know, somebody comes in and has a question and we can say, well, here's what we actually envisioned with this, by this standard, or we can give them a link and they could look, potentially. So Judy, if you'd scroll down till you see some more bold, and there's, so 8.3, there's a whole treatment for windows. And I think that one goes on some more, if you scroll down more. Yes.
There's bold porches, is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's good. Again, you can see that format. Now, Judy, if you can take a big bite of that document and go back to the appendices. They have A through, I don't know what, E or F?
No, the end of the bottom, yeah.
Bottom of the document. Whoop, stop right there. So they're citing code here. Can you back up towards the top till we get to the beginning of that code? There you go. So I was unable to find online. Most of you know that if you go to Parowan's municipal code that, you know, you can just click on a thing and you get to the beginning of the code and it's all right there and you can scroll through it all the way down to Title 15. I can't find Title 17 in Logan's code except within this document. It's embedded in this document. Now I've searched, I've tried 2 or 3 different ways. Tony might be able to figure it out, but I couldn't. And my point here is, when we look at things, we might want to look at this for some ideas. We have code. And there are some things in this code that might help us, and maybe not, but it merits a cursory review. Again, this language is written. This stuff works. It's, you know, it's cut and paste almost if there's things here that we think would work. Okay, if you scroll on down. By the way, Logan said they'd be honored if we copied some of their material. Except we can't have the graphics because they paid a consultant and they're worried that they might be, what's the word? Not copyrighted, but
Infringement.
yeah, anyway. Keep going. Way down there more. Keep going. Okay, there's Appendix B. I don't see anything there. That's interesting. Keep going. Okay.
Wow.
Oh, there's the timeline. Boy, I missed that by a mile. Wrong end of the document. So there's the document I was talking about. That's just kind of fun reading.
I think that would
Steam engine sawmill is in operation with lathe and shingle facilities provided. Interesting. Okay, scroll on through that. Okay, Appendix D. So that's where we get to the Secretary of the Interior Standards. Now, I gave you a direct link to that I just pulled out of this document. They're not really bad reading, actually, and they're not nearly as long as this document. Keep going. Information and resources. So this can help you a lot if you're wondering where stuff came from or you wanted more background. And yeah. So when we do the Old Rock Church, here's a resource that has some things. Now this glossary of terms, Appendix I, is that I guess?
Yes.
That's the same one I handed out so that you'd have that to carry around.
That's it.
Well, and that's it. And that is about all I have to say about any of that. And I think what I'd like to do is now, I realize that I asked everybody to, review Appendix A and come prepared with comments, but we're not going to look at those today. I'd like you to take another look at it in light of some of this information. And we'll come back to, we need to decide on a time, Jim. The meeting. And
Talk to the bosses. Whenever they tell me, I'll be there.
Oh, okay. Well, ladies, it's up to you. It'd be 2 weeks would be our next meeting. I mean, if you have one and you want us to come to it, I suppose, we can do that.
That's right before Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah, we're not gonna do that.
Oh, Tuesday, the week after.
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday?
Planning Commission is December 6th is the next one.
Next one.
Well, I would like time for us to meet first as our committee,
Okay,
discuss it before we meet together,
that'd be great.
because I think we should.
Perfect.
And so I think, and we have a meeting the 29th. And we already have a meeting scheduled for the 29th to discuss something else, and I think we could just maybe discuss it then. So probably nothing until December.
Could you be December 6th? That's our next meeting.
Could we make progress December 6th?
Yeah, not be fully hashing it all out.
I mean, December sixth might be a nice thing. I mean, we'll limit it to no more than an hour, but if it's 15 minutes, that's fine too. It might be nice to hear what you hashed out in your meeting, what direction you're heading or what you're thinking.
I can't meet
No?
night. I'm busy from 5 until 8, so I can't meet that night. But
The sixth?
you guys, but you guys are welcome to meet without me.
No, we need the four of us.
Oh, but I won't be here.
If we have one. Yeah, 'cause it's close to Christmas.
It was the 20th of December.
December.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if, even if on December sixth, you're just coming to relay to us what you discussed in your meeting? So that there's not any future, you know what I mean? Like, so you're not missing out on your participation, but we can then move forward with what you guys discussed.
Great.
Yeah, we'll just, yeah, I'll come, you and I'll come, and
Okay.
Connie, if she's available.
Yep. Unless there's a
And then we'll just do a quick.
So we keep the,
Well, the other, I mean, another option that occurs to me is that as we're working through this, if on December sixth, we're not ready to sit down back together as a group and actually hash anything out or do anything, we could take a member that came in and just, we could do just kind of a report and a discussion about, hey, here we go.
Yeah.
And then hold off into maybe January to get together again and really sit down and buckle down.
True.
Okay, so it's your call. We'll just set the date for December sixth and we'll have a spot in our agenda. And we'll be looking for all of you or some of you or all of that.
Just future reference, Larry, Historical Preservation Committee is known for our short meetings. We really like our short meetings.
Usually 15 minutes tops.
Shots fired.
Get it done and get out.
Well, I'm
Those
not
are
gonna-
shots fired,
I won't-
buddy.
I'm not
He's also
gonna
he's
comment.
also not wrong. They're quick.
Right.
Just one comment, you know, in looking at all of this information you got, we're really not that far.
I agree. I absolutely
You know,
agree.
That, I was just looking at that, certificate of appropriateness. Our little form that we use when they come in, when they, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we go through and
That's
we.
exactly what that is.
Exactly, you know, it's not quite as fancy, but
Right.
it covers what needs to be done and what we suggest and how that works. I think, one of the things that's good about what you presented to us is, I understand the need, especially nowadays, having very specific legalese for people to have and say, okay, this is what we have to do. But in a lot of things, even though we're not Logan, I think we're not that far. We might not have 85 pages of development standards, but with our listings and things like that, I think it wouldn't be that much more to incorporate some of the stuff that you were talking about and put it into a workable document that fits Parowan. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can, because it's really, it's not that different than what we've got.
No, as I dove into all this and took a look at it, for me it was, at first it was overwhelming, and then when I stepped back from it for a couple of days and then took a fresh look at it and looked at our material again, I went, well, you know, we've got all the elements,
We do.
and we, you know, and,
Well, from someone that hasn't been around it the longest, is I think some of the things that we approve could already be part of the document. It could be added to the document. For example, the kind of a fence someone puts up. We have a concrete fence that we approved between an old historic house,
Mhm.
two old buildings, which if we had it part of the document, then it may not always have to be approved, because then we have someone who's 2 blocks away that is putting in a wooden fence. So what you do is probably for the long term, for people coming in and hoping that people with an older house would wanna maybe change a fence, we'd already have decided what kind of a fence you could put and where you could put it.
But on the other hand, I think it's important that they come to the historic
Right.
preservation, and, I mean, we don't meet that often,
No,
really and truly. It's not, our district is small enough and well-established enough that there's not a lot of changes that are taking place.
Well, and that's great. I
Yes,
like that.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
You know, and, so, I think, I was a little overwhelmed when I saw what you had, but I don't think we're that far away. I think with a little tweaking and a little selective pruning and addition, I think we can make what you're talking about, a document that is available for people to get when they come in for a building permit, and have it very clear as to what's required, and
Well, that's the part that I like about what they have, is it's not just this is what you can't do. This is how you take care of your house. This is what we expect. This is the
Yeah.
history. It's really an educating document.
And that would be, like you said, that would be a very helpful thing to have on the city website, where they could pull it up and see and utilize the suggestions that, because number one, we're not gonna be able to afford a consultant, so we may as well steal what Logan's already done.
Well, I think there's a lot of merit
Plagiarize.
in the amount of money that we can save, and the amount of money that they must have spent to get where they are. It's incredible.
But anyway, I think we'll meet together and on the 29th, after we do our first one, and then, get back with you.
Perfect. And thank you all. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
Plagiarize.
Maximum utilization of available resources.
And I don't know who handed these out before the meeting, but thank you. This is the Parowan City stuff for you guys. Okay, we are back on track, I think. Well, we were on track, but we're gonna continue now. Okay, item 6 on the agenda, approval of the minutes from October 4th and October 18th. So, one, has everybody had a chance to look at those, and
That-
2, are there any comments?
That would be why I was late. I apologize for being late. But, I was like reading through the one, and I was like, oh, there's another one. I'm reading through it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, it's 5:52, I gotta go. So, yes, I did get a chance to read through both.
Okay. All right, anybody, any comments on the minutes?
I wasn't in attendance on the 10-4 meeting, so I couldn't review those, but I found nothing on the 10-18 minutes. It seemed like it was fine.
Okay. All right, I'd accept a motion on the minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes for both October 4th, 2023, and October 18th, 2023.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it, thank you. Okay, now to, not my favorite topic, but we'll get there.
We're
So
so
if
good
you're-
at definitions. Come on now.
So, if you recall, I'm sure, in the last meeting, we needed a definition for recreational facilities. And after quite a bit of deliberation, we couldn't get there. We agreed to put it in this meeting, and here we are. Now, I Did any of you see the email I sent that had
Yes.
the, oh, good.
I did.
Thank you, awesome.
I thought I'd printed it, but I didn't.
So, did anybody else come up with any definitions?
No.
All right.
I have, which I was hoping Dan, but maybe you can answer it. So, the last time when we were working on this, in my mindset, I thought that when you built a house and you built a pickleball court in your backyard, that you had to go in and get a conditional use permit.
You should, yes.
But then that's not what Dan said.
What Dan said is it hasn't been enforced.
Oh. So we do have to worry in our definition about public and private, in essence, or no?
Well, I don't think we need to address public and private. So, you know, I don't wanna revisit all of our business from the last meeting,
Right.
but to frame it, the reason we were having the discussion was because we have public facilities in a residential zone.
Mhm.
And so people, well, what does that mean and what does that do for us? And if you remember at the end of the meeting, one of the members of the meeting said, well,
Mhm.
you know, just leave it as recreational facilities and don't define it.
Mhm.
It's as simple as good.
Stuck, I think.
And then I thought about it and I couldn't come up with anything. One really early morning, I said, wow, I could split those words apart. And so, here we are. So if we look at that, recreational means connected with ways of a person enjoying themselves when not working. It's not specific. And then facilities means any real property, including buildings, fixtures, or other improvements located thereon. So, recreational facilities is basically something you would do when you're enjoying yourself on your property and you're not working. Now, that said, could it be challenged? Would somebody say, well, I don't think this is recreation, or I don't think this is a facility, and what do you do about a basketball hoop? Well, the answer to that is, administratively is where some of these decisions are made. They are at the counter in the city building, and they're talking to staff, and they said, you know, staff comes in and goes, hey, I'm gonna put in a basketball hoop, and you know, do I need a permit for that? And there's gonna be some questions asked, right, Keith? And they're gonna render a decision. They're gonna say, no, we're not gonna require you to get a conditional use permit for something like that because, well, whatever the reason is. It's small, it's limited, it's clearly not gonna interfere with the neighborhood or the neighbors, sort of a thing. However, the guy says, well, it's not just one basketball hoop, it's two, and we're gonna have, tournaments, yeah, and so on here, and we might wanna put bleachers in and so on. Well, they're, you know, they might back away from that and say you're gonna have to, you know, go before planning commission and get a conditional use permit. And so, that's my take on these recommendations, but, I'll take comments from, productive comments, from just about anywhere. Because in our code, what that translates to is in the residential, well, in just about any district where we were allowed, recreational courts, it expands the definition to recreational facilities, which includes courts, but also would include just about any other recreational thing you can think of. Bocce ball courts,
I'd say, would this open it up too large when you're saying facilities is talking fixtures like playground sets and stuff, and would that offer up too many questions to the city because we're being way too broad, and so like you can't put a playground on your own property because it's a facility, it's a fixture on your property, that they have to go and ask the city for permission to get like something simple as a playground? Like a
Well-
swing, you know, like
Yeah,
that's just.
trampoline or whatever. yeah.
Exactly, a
Yeah,
trampoline, like
right.
anything, like, I mean, anything that would force everyone to go ask a question for, I mean, that's a like fixtures is the word that I'm more kind of caught up on, just the questions it might.
The problem is if you don't include fixtures, then there's some things that, you know,
Yeah,
become
both sides.
problematic.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't answer that question because I can't read into the future. I can look into the past and I can ask the city, how often do you have people coming in asking if they need a permit for, you know, recreational things in their yard? We already know that they don't come in and ask if they need a permit for a pickleball court and, you know, things like that. So I'm suspecting that it's not gonna get overused. I'm suspecting that it's a point of clarification or inclusion or exclusion when we're challenged.
I was thinking that our hang up and why we couldn't come to a decision, it wasn't that we had an issue with what our definition was that we had come up with, it was the word private that was where we were struggling, because private meaning it's for sole persons or a business where you have to be a member. That's how I see private, whereas when we're talking about the pump track and the pickleball courts, those are going to be public.
Multi-use.
Yeah.
So let me ask this, 'cause I hear where you're coming from. But what this is, this doesn't care. Doesn't care if it's public or private. What we're saying is the city has to follow its own processes. So we don't have to say public or private. It's just, if you're doing that, just the city wants to build pickleball courts, they needed a conditional use permit, just like any residence would need a conditional use permit. I don't see the value added by making a distinction between public and private. 'Cause if you don't need a conditional use permit, you're not gonna get in that space anyway.
Right, well, I'm just thinking, I don't know if, Judy, if you're able to pull up that definition from the minutes. It's, October 18th.
I have it here. What do you want me to read?
Yeah.
You want me to read it?
Well, I have it.
Oh, yeah.
Judy can pull it up.
I was just thinking if Judy can pull it
Oh,
We
okay.
can see it.
up so that everybody could see it. Sorry, Judy, what'd you just say?
Oh, so,
Oh, okay.
now let's not go through that.
Okay, then you don't have to worry about that then. I mean, I can read it to you, but I mean, basically, it lists the various we had all talked about. But where we got hung up was after volleyball courts, it said, or other similar private outdoor recreation uses enclosed with fencing, and then had lawn bowling, greens, and, why not just similar outdoor recreation? Why is the word private or we don't need that word.
Exactly.
And I think that then it would probably be fine, 'cause it would be applicable to a residence or a facility that's, you know, going to be like what we're talking about with the city in R1.
Okay, so if you've got that there, I bet Judy can type it almost as fast as you could say it.
I'll read slow.
Oh,
Okay. That's okay, it's,
So what I'd like to see us do, I'm open for that, if you can modify that definition, and we get a motion going, and if we think it's gonna work, we'll vote on it, and we'll be done with it.
Okay, so you want me to read it? Recreational facilities means the use of land for parks, playgrounds, are you typing? I don't hear anything. Oh, so you don't need me to read it? Okay. I'll start again, 'cause, sorry, I was just thrown off. I'm like, where's the tapping? I'm like,
You got a new
yeah, I'm like, where's the tapping? Recreational facilities means the use of land for parks, playgrounds, tennis, pickleball, basketball, or volleyball courts, or other similar outdoor recreation uses enclosed with fencing, lawn bowling greens, indoor and outdoor skating rinks, athletic fields, bicycle tracks, not bicycle tracks, skate parks, picnic areas, swimming pools, community centers, and similar uses to the foregoing, together with necessary and accessory buildings and structures, but not including a track for racing of animals or any form of motorized vehicles. Was that another hang-up, was motorized?
No, we worked
Okay.
through that.
I
Okay.
think she did was drop the word private.
For me, I look at that and I go, so this definition that's on our screen would work with that definition if we added, or could be the definition. It would take care of everything that you mentioned there in fewer words. But we probably need to add that last sentence that says excluding whatever.
Not including a track for the racing of animals.
All that kind of stuff.
Motorized vehicles.
If we put that on there, I think it would probably work. But I'm not hard over. I'll accept the motion and vote on either of those unless somebody sees something that just won't cut it.
So back to Tony's point.
Yeah?
If that's the case, then what would have to receive a conditional use permit and what wouldn't?
Well,
He's saying that you guys would have to determine, the administratively would have to determine.
The way this one, to me, if I was to read that, every single thing would require everyone to come and ask permission.
Right.
Which the other definition does have some, like this within fencing and whatever, and so that it's a little more,
okay.
limited, not like, so landowners can actually put, like say, any, maybe a basketball hoop or something, like a trampoline or something like that, without needing to come to the city to ask for conditional permits for, if they wanted to follow the rules, obviously.
'Cause I mean, the reality of it is somebody says, can I put up a basketball hoop that I bought at Walmart? And we're gonna say, why are you in here asking? But if it's in our code, it can be weaponized, it could be, my neighbor didn't do this, and it says right in their code, you need to make them do that, and you know what I'm saying? So we need to put in what we want in, is all I'm saying.
Okay, well, for me to look at that definition that you just recited, Heather, I need to see it.
Yeah, Judy, are you able to put it like below what Larry submitted? Can you copy and paste it? So that we have the two to be able to look at at the same time?
Oh, found it.
Recreational facility means the use of land for parks. Right, and then when I read it, I left the word private out.
You did.
Others, on the second line, yeah, 'cause that was one of the things that we,
Well, is everybody looking at that?
Any ideas from the other side?
Yeah, I'm waiting. Weston, anything?
What's that?
Any comments on deaf?
Is it too much?
Wouldn't the word public just solve a lot?
Well,
If we're worried about getting this misapplied to private properties?
It's supposed to be
well, it applies
applied
to the city as well.
Yeah, but couldn't you just put, to be more specific, couldn't you put public recreational facilities?
Well, it's not just the city, it's also,
It's supposed to be for,
also residential and so on. So the proposal here is that we strike the word private and avoid the word public, and then it's applicable across the board. And I believe that's the intent.
The intent, what does he mean by that?
the intent that if you're a homeowner and you wanna put a pickleball court in your backyard, you need to come in for a conditional use permit.
And it doesn't
And-
matter whether you're the city or it's your home.
Is that the way it is?
It applies across the board.
Yeah, I think so.
Is it?
Can I ask, is that the way, that's a great question, Weston, is this the way it is today? Is that?
No.
I apologize, I missed the 18th meeting.
There's no definition today.
Oh, so that's what we're trying to get at,
Yes.
thank you.
This whole thing came out of, the city out on the Valentine Sports Complex, which is still zoned R1, wanted to do pump track and pickleball courts. And technically it says that you need a conditional use permit to do a recreational court. And we didn't know what that meant. Did a pump track, was that a recreational court or not? So that's why we went down this road.
And the initial, bat in the spokes, if you will, was somebody mentioned, well, they had the word public in there, I think, or private, and it just went downhill from there.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take credit for that, because I was trying to say, listen, if what we're trying to do is we're not trying to micromanage what people do in their backyards with their own recreation. What we're trying to do is prohibit some commercial type thing just popping up in a backyard next to somebody else that could be like impacted by it. That's why I suggested maybe we just use the word private or public. That's where that came from.
But that would be commercial, not residential, wouldn't it?
Yeah, which is exactly why you would need it in a residential zone. If it said public is only allowable by condition, then you would do that. But, like, for example, right now, if you wanna put a swimming pool in your backyard, you gotta come get a conditional use permit for it. But if you had the word public in there, you'd have to get a conditional use permit before you opened a business in your backyard, a business swimming pool that you charge people and have parking and all that stuff. That's where the impetus behind public and that came from, so. But it introduced other issues, so it was just an idea.
Jerry?
I don't know. I think I'm okay with it. I think no matter how you word it, you're gonna get people bumping heads and not, I don't think there's a perfect way to word that to make it all inclusive, fix the problem.
Tony, what are you thinking?
I like personally I like the larger one that lists a little more background, but then my only thing in there was making sure, 'cause it only counts in there if it has a enclosed fence, right? So with the first allotted statements, so, which might facilitate, you know, I don't know what you're looking for to try and stop or not, or what have you, but, right, so like pickleball, basketball, volleyball, you could, based on this definition, still put one up if it does not have a fence, and you would not need a permit. But again, if that's okay, 'cause that's a personal use, is a fence,
Yeah.
mean it more of a public?
Devil's advocate, then I could put that swimming pool in as long as I
Well,
don't fence it, which
That,
is
no,
also.
exactly, so, well,
But is
that's what-
there,
But like what kind, why did you, like when you're talking swimming pool, then you, I mean, I know it always gets tricky, like what kind of swimming pool? Is it above ground swimming pool? Can you put that in, like what? Does it have to be a permanent structure? Then it goes into the building codes. I just think it's kinda tricky, 'cause the more you put, the more,
Right,
the more tricky this is gonna get, and the more open it is, then the more questions you're gonna get as well, so. My answer, I don't know what the answer is, but yeah.
Exclude personal use. Maybe.
That might be.
and remember, the city
Yeah.
is putting in pickleball courts. They will not be for personal use, and they are required to get a conditional use permit.
Right, so if you put that in, it would still make, I don't know why we're really worried about trying to restrict the city, 'cause the city could change the code
Don't want
or the zoning anyways,
individual.
but
With
if
due
you,
process, yeah.
with due process, but I'm saying, I think that we're overworking that aspect of this, is that we're trying to make sure the city doesn't do something. And what we're probably gonna do is end up with a heavy-handed document towards the personal use in R1, R2 zones or whatever. So, but if you had that personal use thing in there, then it allows residents to kinda do what they want without having to come in for conditional use permits. But here's the thing, there really is sometimes impact on neighbors for certain recreational uses in backyards. I mean,
well, that's,
maybe we wanna restrict that, maybe we don't.
Well, there's
That's your
things like
decision.
setbacks. I mean, you build a pickleball court in a backyard, depending on the size of your lot. I mean, there's setback issues, and lighting and so on that can come into play.
Yeah.
And if we let it slide based on, well, it's for personal use, I'm not sure what that does
Well,
for us.
currently, there's not a bunch of regulations on that other than standard setbacks, right? So is there a big problem?
no, but they have to know what those setbacks are.
Yeah, but that's already established, right?
So there's setbacks, yeah.
Wouldn't a pickleball court just have to have the same setback as a building?
I don't know.
That'd be my guess, but.
In some cases, it's 2 feet.
Yeah. As far as
Well,
lighting.
we generally refer to structures, accessory, structures.
Structures.
Setbacks apply to that, so.
I mean, I guess the way I'm looking at it is I'm not trying to restrict, residents from having various facilities that they want to have in their backyard, but I do think that if it is something of substance, not a kiddie pool, something of substance, you know, that it needs to come through the city, and a conditional use permit needs to be obtained. It's not that we're gonna say, no, you can't. Well, it depends, obviously. I mean, there are chances, but I think there needs to be some eyes on that when that happens. If that makes sense.
So the challenge is in the wording that you just worked through, you use the words "of substance." So now I would challenge you to define that.
I think we're getting sidetracked on.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, we're getting,
Personal property when we should be looking at public use.
so.
But that's the thing is, we're not talking about only public use. Our definition for recreational facilities isn't just,
It looks like it should be.
I think that's what he's saying.
Because a recreational facility isn't typically, that's not what you would call anything private. Like if somebody had an indoor basketball court, you wouldn't refer to that as a recreational facility, it's their own personal thing, right?
If they built it in a building, its own building?
Yeah.
It would be a
Or you
private
mean in their
recreational,
garage?
it'd be a private recreational facility at best, it couldn't be just lumped in with this.
Well, first off, you'd need a permit to build the building. What you're gonna use it for on the inside wouldn't matter.
Right. But I'm in favor of all of the rules for a public recreational facility. But on the private level, I'm not in favor of telling everybody what to do by the letter. Especially imposing more restrictions than we have right now on the private. 'Cause I don't see a bunch of problems happening. Have you had any complaints? I mean, we don't wanna dream up an issue here where there's not one, right?
Yeah, so what are you recommending we do to that definition?
Excluding private. That way you leave the private property owner their rights.
So were you suggesting, as you did before, saying public recreational facilities, like including that so that it's specific to public?
Or you say commercial, or something like that, instead of public. Public is a weird word.
That's a good, alright.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe you use municipal, 'cause wouldn't it be municipal?
Well, no, I mean, you could open a business, anybody could open a business in their backyard that's quite to use Heather's word of substance, that, let's be real.
With a occupation, home
Home-based?
occupation.
But that's okay, 'cause you have to come for a permit.
Right, well, that's a code violation, I mean, at this point. So, my understanding right now of the code is that what we have is, if you're gonna put a recreational facility in, it requires a conditional use permit. I mean, that was the intent, and that was the standing code when we started down this path. We didn't have any intent on changing the meaning of the code or the application of the code. And if we were to strike these words from the tables in the zoning code, we're basically saying you wouldn't need a conditional use permit for any of these things anymore. And you wouldn't have to talk to the city. And you could put any of them in you wanted, as long as you followed the right procedure for building permits. And I wasn't thinking that was where we were trying to go.
How about municipal or commercial?
Municipal or commercial?
Municipal, let's say municipal and commercial recreational facilities. Doesn't that focus you down to what you wanna control?
No. So I'm not trying to control anything, I'm just trying.
You're wanting to put regulations on what people can do in their.
They just have to come in
No,
and get a
those
permit.
regulations are already there.
Okay.
They are there now, I'm not trying to remove them. And what I'm hearing from you directly is change the wording to remove those restrictions. And that's a much bigger bite of something that I didn't think we were getting into.
So you're stating that all these things in there, they're restricted today, currently?
Under the words recreational court. Right?
There's no more, right, now if you remember in the
We
last
did,
meeting,
we changed
those
that.
words are now recreational facilities, so the words recreational court are gone from our code. And the words in their place are recreational facilities.
so today, they should not, no one should be able to put in, if you will, a pickleball court at all.
Well,
Under
they
the
just can't
current
put in a recreational facility, but we
We
don't have it
haven't defined
defined.
it.
Hasn't
It's
defined.
not
Okay,
defined.
so it just says recreational facility, but
Correct.
it's just
It
open.
says that it's a conditional use.
Yep.
That's where we left off. Recreational facility is conditional use with no definition.
Okay.
Right. And so the attempt here was to just put a definition on recreational facilities that kept us in bounds, so to speak. But we are now down in the weeds. I'm gonna give us 5 more minutes when it hits, well, that clock will say 9:30, it's really only 8:30, so.
Oh,
We can't figure it
didn't
out,
call
we're
back.
gonna take it for homework again. But I'd like to leave here and with an agreement, what we're trying to do here.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Trying to buy us some more time?
Fall back.
Recreational
Yeah,
facility.
we have another hour.
I'm with you. I guess, yeah, I'm just keep thinking like what, I guess, I know we wanna get a definition for recreational facilities, but also by placing this indirectly, we could be interfering with personal versus public or commercial, whatever we wanna say, installations of, or anything.
I don't think there's a difference. I mean, if you're in a residential zone and you're putting in I mean, we're not trying to, if they put one in, whether they use it for residential or commercial, it would need a conditional use permit. And it would have before we started down this path.
Yeah.
So we haven't,
So it maybe would have, because it wasn't defined, so we don't know, right?
well, the code says if you want a recreational court, is what it said, that it had to have a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
And it didn't care if it was public or private.
Great, but a court is a court, but then
Right.
within this goes outside of court.
Well,
Yes, it does, and that
so
was my
that-
point, is it got really broad.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, what really the purpose is.
I mean, we talked about taking picnic area out, you know, and we were down to that level
Yeah.
of detail, and I'm going, we don't need to be down that far.
Gotcha.
And I took that other approach and
Went real
Instead-
simple.
I went real simple. To just go, okay, this works, and administratively, they can figure that out. And then we started talking about, well, every citizen in town now that wants to paint a hopscotch on their driveway is gonna come in and ask if that's okay. And I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't
Probably
think you
won't,
do
but they-
either.
Yeah, if they read that and they
We
were
might get
trying
a
to
couple.
follow, maybe.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Public.
Publicly owned.
Yeah.
Yep.
Publicly
Publicly owned, we would reverse that, would we? Or not?
Why don't you just
Because
add
that
court
doesn't
to
work,
track
with that definition
or,
wouldn't
track
work
to
with our
court.
code.
on the original?
Because you,
Sorry, Weston, what'd you just say?
Could you just add track to the original right after court or track?
well, we've already modified the code and court is now not in there any longer. At the last meeting, we struck the word recreational court and put in recreational facilities in its place.
Well, we can always strike it back.
Or in the
Well, yeah.
definition, put publicly, what was the wording?
Courts or tracks.
That was clearly not the intent of our original code.
Mm-mm.
Dave, any comments?
Help us, Dave.
Yeah.
Words of wisdom from the mountaintop.
Yeah, don't go there. There was, it seems to me the issue is one of the issues is to try to separate, not the city or municipalities from private as far as, restrictions on conditional use and making different, I guess, restrictions of private property. I don't know, is there any way to, I don't know if you'd have to write two different separate, I don't know, to address the city, municipalities versus private.
Keep them separate and distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Once again, there's pluses and minuses on both sides.
Right.
I can see Weston's point, you're infringing upon people's rights as property owners, and yet, back to the pickleball, just as an example, I've heard the noise, just if there's 4 or 5, whatever, people playing, or there's usually 4 people on a pickleball court.
Well, I think you're gonna have a lighting issue too with
Right.
pickleball courts within a residential area.
Don't we have a noise ordinance too? Doesn't noise have to shut down after 10 o'clock?
Yeah, we do have a noise ordinance, nuisance code, basically, noise.
And same way with, the basketball going boink, 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 boink at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, or kids, having a good time and yelling and screaming and hey, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I don't like to infringe upon people's rights either as homeowners, and yet you have to be considerate of your neighbors as well. So.
Some of those things are already covered, like a noise ordinance,
Well, that's what I say, you're duplicating certain things. Because you already have some ordinances that refer to setback, sliding, noise, and so forth. And so, yeah, I'm really cautious about duplication and, complicating the bureaucracy, believe me. Because when you deal and when you get it layered, it's impossible to do anything.
So is this even necessary?
There's a question.
Yes.
Well, if you
And why is that, Heather?
Because it's already in our codes.
Well, take it out.
Well, there's one, to me, this is simple and straightforward, that Judy just put up there. The term recreation area or facility means an indoor or outdoor park, building, site, or other facility that is dedicated to recreation purposes and administered by a public or, whoops, that gets to be a problem. If we got out the business about administered by, if it just said public or private entity, to me, that's about where we need to be.
Yeah.
So you would need to have an outdoor park, the conditional use to have an outdoor park in your backyard. What does that mean? Or a site? I don't feel comfortable with that at all.
Well, somewhere you...
Dedicated to recreation purposes.
Here's another one.
Well,
yeah.
A site that is,
Site or other
a site that is dedicated to recreational purposes.
That's too broad.
well,
I'm not looking at it from a policy standpoint, although I have opinions. I'm keeping them to myself. I'm looking at it from an administrative standpoint, and when somebody comes to the city and says, okay, what does that mean? And I'm like, it needs to be clear.
Yeah.
And it needs to do what we want to do.
What was wrong with it? You tell us again? What was wrong with Utah's definition again?
I don't remember.
Oh, because it, publicly owned and operated. And and our current code requires private, right, for residents to have a conditional use permit.
You have to look at all of these definitions in the context of our code. We can't just take a naked definition out of the dictionary and just plug it in, 'cause the one we just picked is, you know, a good example of why we can't do that. And so what is it we're trying to do?
Well, do you need to change the code to be conducive and, you know, to complement what you're doing here?
Well, if we are into a review of code in light of looking at not requiring a conditional use that's been required or has been on our books for forever, because we can't figure out a definition for something, so be it. But then somebody needs to make that motion. As it is now, 8:30, we've got time to make a motion, we've got time to make a motion. We can put this off, figure out what to do again, and come back and do this again. But we gotta get out of this box. So if the code, if we're looking at modifying the code to change whether we need a conditional use permit for recreational facilities, then, okay. Like I say, it's a simple vote, make a motion, we all vote our mind. We don't all have to agree on everything here.
To me, I think we need a more solid purpose, obviously, 'cause I understand the definition is needed, but the purpose behind the definition is not clear to me. So, I'd make a motion to put it off, unfortunately, to define that.
To define what?
Define the purpose behind what recreational facilities.
More research needed.
More research, like what is the purpose of why are we doing that? Not just to get a definition, but getting a definition, if you're putting other things in it, it has a lot more substance behind it. So why are we doing it? The purpose. It sounds to me like nobody has an answer to the purpose.
Was that a motion?
I'll second.
I'm thinking about that.
Don't forget what the motion is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a motion.
'cause I'm wondering if he can say it again.
Sure, I'll make a motion to postpone or, to table, okay, to table the definition of recreational facilities
I second the motion.
Till the next meeting.
till the next meeting, yes, yes.
December 6th.
And
And Weston second.
Weston
Weston
seconded.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. If we do this enough, they won't need us anymore.
That's funny.
All right, guys. So the homework for that is, you heard it. What's the purpose? I'm not gonna define it for you. You guys are members of this board and this commission. I expect you guys to participate, and girls. Bring something. Write down what you think the purpose of this is, bring it back, and we'll discuss it. And hopefully, then we can move forward. And if it turns out we don't need to do it, then
Mr. Chairman,
we don't need to do it. Yes, Dave.
Jamie's not here, could you get her information and maybe so she could get her
I'll do it.
opinion,
You bet.
'cause that would help maybe.
I didn't hear you, I didn't hear what she said.
I just asked,
Yes.
Jamie's not here, if we could just get her this information to have
Okay,
her,
yeah.
get her, opinion and, so that maybe we could get this done.
Okay,
Shot this time of day.
moving right along here. Item, number 8. So this is Parowan subdivision ordinance, partnership update. So Judy, if you could bring up that last thing.
Update partnership, there's a big difference.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So the city, let me back up. So the state revised with House Bill 174, and I think House Bill, I'm gonna go out on a limb, 406, I don't think it's in here. Dealt with a couple things. So House Bill, or Senate Bill 174 was subdivision code. So they rewrote some subdivision code and they put some teeth in it that said, for a city of our class and so on, I think we have to comply with that by December of next year. And
We've been stressed about it.
yeah, we've been worried about it. We know it's needed to have been done. The cool thing is that the state has provided funding to have professional consulting firms.
And let me tell you, this did not happen lightly. We complained and moaned and said enough unfunded mandates, and we dragged them kicking and screaming to provide some funding. So this is one case of getting what we asked for. Sorry, I'm providing some color to Larry's.
Yeah, thank you. So as we do that, in the end, what happens is there's basically, I'm gonna call it a grant, but it's not even a grant we apply for, do we, Dan? Do we have to apply?
No, we just have to, sign an MOU with one of the companies that's
Right.
pre-approved to do it.
So this company, Hanson Planning Group, is the same group that assisted us with our general plan. So they have quite extensive experience with our code and language and so on in our general plan, as well as with our city in general. And so they proposed to rewrite our code, subdivision code, let me just say it that way. And their first available opening is in February of 2024.
Wow.
Now that said, if they don't do that, guess who's gonna do that? And so, that said, given that it's not gonna really cost anything, we need to make a recommendation to city council as to whether to follow this, to use a consultant to do this or not. We don't necessarily need to recommend a specific consultant, but I believe we get more bang for our buck if we use somebody where we're not starting from scratch. In other words, somebody that doesn't know our city, is not familiar with our issues.
And did you say that the grant is available?
It's there, it's
okay.
it's not really a grant, all the background work is done by the consulting firm.
The beauty of this is it doesn't actually run through the city budget. They bill the state directly for the work they do for us.
Oh, my.
I was just gonna ask, does the state have suggested,
Yeah, there's a pre-approved list of consultants that
and
can do it.
Hanson is on that?
Yep. So this is actually Mike Hansen, who works with, you've heard him at Rural Consultants, which is a part of,
Right.
Jones and DeMille. And he's partnering with, I don't know the exact nature, but I think he's partnering with Jones and DeMille, and they call it the Hanson Planning Group, and that's what they do. General plans,
Okay.
stuff like that.
Point of information, is this, is Ryan Robinson affiliated with this group?
So he was with the group that did the work on the general plan.
Okay, 'cause
And
he
Mike
did
Hansen was his boss at the.
okay, is Ryan still affiliated?
Well, that I don't know. I can't.
He's not? Okay.
No.
'Cause he did, you know, he would be one that would understand, and
What's he doing now, Mo?
he really did a good job on that general plan,
He did.
and I think we got more bang for our buck there because he was a local
Is he-
business.
Is it
He's
on?
assistant city manager in Alpine,
Okay,
so I
that's
don't
right.
think
Oh,
he's still
that's
working
right.
with Jones and
State your
DeVille.
name.
Mayor Halterman.
I'm grooming him to replace me as the city manager someday. Every time I see him, I say, "Hey, there's my replacement."
Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yes, indeed.
So
Yeah.
yeah, 'cause if, he would have been very familiar with our city
Yeah.
general plan, 'cause he did it pretty much.
You want me to make a motion?
I would, yeah.
Okay.
that'd be great.
I make a motion that positive recommendation to city council, right? Is that where we're at? Yeah.
Yep.
So I make a motion that we give a positive recommendation to city council to utilize one of the approved Utah state, we don't, right? We don't want to, yeah, one of the approved Utah state, what's the word?
Consulting firm.
Consulting. I knew it started with a C. I was stuck on it. Consulting firms to, update Parowan subdivision ordinance in according to state law. Or new, however you guys want me to.
Dan?
I'm just waiting until you're done so I can say how excited I am, 'cause they update our forms too. We'll need a little help there too. That's
Oh.
included.
So I'll take she's done.
Yeah.
You want the form?
Sure, read it back.
No, you don't,
Oh, doesn't need to
add that.
Okay, okay,
You can, do you wanna read it back?
please.
That goes into effect in 2024, or did we not
No, we
need to
don't
say
need to
that?
say it.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we got it. So we may get more than that out of this. If they get so you're all aware that subdivision code is pretty much in Title 14. But Title 14 has a lot of things that, little snakes and ribbons that flow in and out of it. And, this company at least claims that they will help tie up all those loose ends. Okay? Dan, we are on number 9, which is letter of support for rural community grant for industrial park master plan.
Yeah, so do you guys remember when we went through the process to formalize the Economic Development Committee? Because as a formal Economic Development Committee, they can be the one that recommends that we can apply for some of these state grants, economic development grants. One of these state grants, Rural Community Grant, we're applying for. It's due Friday. Been working on it this week. Actually, I've been working on it for a couple of months. I've been hitting it really hard this week to get it done. Want to have it submitted tomorrow. In talking with the state, I don't remember what Colette Cox's name is. I mean her title, but she helps with these things. She thought that it would be a really good idea if we actually had a letter of support from the Planning Commission. It's not required under the grant. What is required is the Economic Development Committee, since it was formalized. But in this case, what we're actually applying for is a master plan for the industrial park around the airport. This master plan will be a map and drawings so that we can show kind of where the roads and utilities are. Ultimately, what the city really wants and frankly needs badly is improved infrastructure, specifically the airport road. It needs to be rebuilt, and we'd like to extend it around the airport. We want to have like a business loop, and we want to kind of show some design and have that planned for. Now, we can put that in our transportation plan, but we want to actually have a map and design work so that we can go after grants. And if we have that, we actually wrote a grant for the congressional earmark spending in Chris Stewart's office. We didn't have a lot of substance in terms of maps and grants and plans and construction drawings and stuff like that. So what we're writing a grant for is that, which will help us leverage to go get some grants.
So what is that vision in a nutshell? I mean, I heard what you just said. It sounded like a road, but that road's gonna serve us something.
Well, the vision is more than a road. It is the fact that, and this is why this body makes sense to have, planning and a lot of economic development doesn't necessarily have an overlapping nexus with planning and zoning. In this case, it does. Like 90, I don't know the exact percentage, let's call it 95, it's pretty dang close. 95% of our industrial and manufacturing zoned land is raw land that is not serviced by utilities or roads out past the airport. That land is just sitting, most of it's in greenbelt, it's doing the city no good. If we can designate an industrial park and we can actually get some of the utilities put in, we can incentivize businesses to come in and put some investment into that, which we can then it'll help develop our airport. Right now it runs in the red. It does not pay for itself. It's not a commercial airport, so it doesn't really benefit the citizens. Unless you literally own a plane and fly in and out of here, that airport doesn't really do a lot of good to the city. An airport is a great asset, but ours is kind of underutilized, and not to mention all of that undeveloped land around it. So that's why a city will designate an industrial park. We'll get out and market it, try to get businesses to come in, and having a master plan is kind of the first appropriate step in doing that. So that's what we're trying to write a grant for, and I was just going to call Larry and say, hey Larry, do you mind writing a letter of support? And then I was like, you know what, this is probably a good discussion item, and it'd probably be a good action to take by the committee to write it or not. Economic development has already proved it. We'll write it one way or the other, but it would have a lot more weight, and we should include planning and zoning since given the nature of it. So that's why it's on the agenda.
Okay.
That master plan include the infrastructure.
Yeah, it'll show it, it'll detail it, it'll correlate. It doesn't replace any of the city's official general plan documents or anything like that, but we'll want it to overlap. This is kind of similar to, and I'm going to look at Molly, grab her out of her, I'm sure she's doing amazing stuff right now. Like our active transportation plan, it doesn't replace our transportation plan. Our transportation plan has active transportation, but this is this additional kind of a button-on document that'll help us go after grants for bicycle paths and all that stuff. So this is another example of that. It's like it doesn't replace any of our official general plan documents, but it will kind of assist and help, especially in writing grants and trying to incentivize businesses and stuff.
But I think with that condition of that property being raw, that the infrastructure's gonna be really strategic.
Oh yeah, definitely.
These kinds of things just give a lot of maturity to our applications and give them a lot of credibility and credentials. It's not like we're just going out there and acting like we just came up with this and it's just roughed out, you know, in a very general way in a document that almost has a more to come kind of feeling to it, but where we've taken it to the next step, we put the planning in place, we have others involved, we have, the easiest way for me to say it is, it's just a more mature approach from a city that shows that we've done everything we can on our side, now we're bringing it to them because that's where we need help. We've done what we can for ourselves, and if we have these things in place, it just puts us in a different position when we approach this money.
And it refers to industrial park, like in our future land use map. We've been calling this industrial park for a long time in different documents, but what is it? It's not designated. There's no boundaries, there's no definition, there's no, what are we trying to do out there? There's nothing. It's just, out there by the airport, that's our industrial manufacturing area.
And we talk about that and it feels good, but it just doesn't have a lot of structure to it. There's not really any scaffolding under it. It's just kind of, I say finger painted. It's like it's out there. It's out there. And it,
On the application, I drew a big circle around a area.
Is it safe to assume that, if we do get a grant and we start down the path for one of these, this industrial park master plan, that it'll be circulated like the active transportation plan?
That it'll be what?
Comment and so on?
Oh, definitely.
Mhm.
So what we would do with the grant is actually just hire an engineering firm.
Mhm.
And part of it is the integration with our other plans and stuff. They would come and work with this body, the city council, and probably have public hearings and stuff like that.
and more, the more engagement we get in these processes, the better the deliverable from the engineers, the more useful, the more appropriate, the less boilerplate, templated, which drives me a little crazy when I can tell it's just a template and it doesn't really have input and things we want, because then we've got to just keep touching it and touching it. So I'm like, while it's being worked through by an engineer, we're paying someone, that's when we need to be touching it, not amending it later. I mean, I get things come up, but it just gives us a really nice document that we can work from. It's visioning, it's planning for the future. It's what everyone likes to feel when they think about what we've done as far as the work that we've spent all this time on. So it's important. It's a next level step. And it's good, it's really good to get it done. So, but funding's always the issue. And so Colette Cox is like Governor's Office of Rural Opportunity or something.
OEO, Governor's Office of Economic Development, and she specifies in the
Specifically
rural.
So they know we can't pay for these things ourselves, and it does bring us to a place all the time where we just get stuck. And if we keep getting stuck, it's not just frustrating for us, but we're not being able to take care of our communities the way we need to. So in realizing that, they're giving us tools, but we have to come to the table. We have to do the work on our end. So
Thank you.
that's part of it. I hope that helps.
Yes.
This might be a stupid question, but the land that you're talking about for this master plan, is it city land? Is it,
Yes and no.
okay,
There's private land, a lot of private land out there. The city owns a lot of the airport, owns the entire airport, but also land around the airport. We have areas that's designated for, within the airport envelope, hangars and things like that. And then there's areas just outside of that the city also owns. I mean, we'll identify things like, you know, we want to incentivize light industrial and aerospace and technology and things like that that really pop on the state's level, and then they will want to give us money to develop that. But ultimately, this will be more, this will benefit private individuals and businesses in the long term more than it does anything else.
well, I just was thinking, I guess what my thought was is you can go into planning an industrial park, but if it's all privately owned land, how are you gonna get them on board to
I
build
thought
it?
most of it was city that we're talking about.
A lot of
That was it, I just didn't wanna wait.
But it doesn't affect, but that's why you have certainly the engagement. You know, so right now we have one property owner that's trying to build, and they're like, there's no utilities.
Right.
Is the city gonna build all this? And we're like, we don't build utilities for development, you're gonna have to do that. I have another one that called me last week, and he's like, what do we have out here? When is something coming out here? And, he may have had something to do with our billboard discussion, and so forth.
Well, good. If I had some land out there, I'd start PPDX, Parowan Package Delivery Express. There at the airport. Okay,
Post office job.
Well, I move that planning and zoning provide a letter of support for the rural community grant for the planned industrial park master plan, I guess.
Does that mean you're gonna write it?
I didn't say that.
I have a template, but you're welcome to write your own, but I need it signed by tomorrow, Larry, if you approve it.
You better send that template in a minute here.
Yes.
Yes, I'll write it.
You'll write it? Then I'll
right.
make a motion.
Okay.
I wasn't gonna make a motion unless.
I thought Larry already did.
Yeah.
Well, chairs aren't supposed to make motions.
That's okay.
They can,
I think the chair
Come on.
can if there's not, like, any other way, but generally speaking.
yeah.
I can do it. Come on now. All right, I make a motion that we have Larry write a letter of support on behalf of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the Rural Community Grant for Industrial Park Master Plan.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, one last item before we get to item 10.
Oh,
And
Member
I'm
reports.
just-
we're not allowed to have member reports
We're not
tonight.
gonna do member
Oh.
reports.
It's not on the agenda.
So, this is just an FYI. Today, in the afternoon, I sent out the second draft of the Parowan City Active Transportation Plan and asked for comments from you folks to go directly back to the mayor in a time frame of like a week.
The second iteration of,
Yeah, this is the second draft.
It's
This'll
by,
come-
it's by December first. We have a little bit of time,
All right, there you go. She gave you an extension.
yeah. It's, and it's
That's
been,
called
it's been touched,
subversion.
like Jerry gave some input and some others. We turned in about, I think, 12 or so individuals' input, and it was all adjusted accordingly. So when the email comes through, you'll see the changes that were made. And so it's getting really close, but they're trying to wrap it up because it's been almost a year, believe it or not. We started at the beginning of the year. So they need, for their department, they need to get that wrapped up. But I think it's come a long way, and it's definitely, again, a good guiding document.
two things. One, did you send it to the city council? 'Cause they're gonna wanna have some input before.
I did.
And two, I noticed when I looked at it, we didn't ever put a line that goes over the exit 78 north interchange to the other side, and I don't know how that skipped my mind, but just before I forget, we wanna make sure that that's the case. 'Cause we want that to be on UDOT's map,
Mhm.
because we're gonna have to get funding from UDOT to put that over there, so.
Okay, good call, good catch.
Good
Right,
one.
but thanks to those of you who have looked at that and were part of the focus groups and things, it's really come a long way.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the second draft, but I will, now that,
It's pretty impressive, the incorporation of comments and the letter that came with it, lining out what they changed and so on is quick turnaround and well done. All right, one last motion.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
8:56 PM.
I mean,
So what are you proposing over that, a walkway or?